Stay hungry, stay foolish.
As always, thanks to our sponsor, Zai. Zai is a global fintech supporting digital native and non-native businesses in the financial services sector. You can check them out at hellozai.com. Our guest today is in person, our first in-person episode ever. And that is thanks to the sponsorship by Zai. We have further investment to have new cameras. We have several of them on us now. It's kind of uncomfortable, right, Greg? His book is Business Book of the Year in 2020. He published it during the pandemic, and the pandemic only accelerated the need for this book. He is author of The Human Edge. Greg Orme, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here in Dublin, Aidan. It's fantastic. Does that mean you're going to pay for my flight now? Now you've got sponsorship. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Damn it, I shouldn't have said it yet. So great to have you with us, man. Great to meet you, because you've been on the show before.
I have, and we were saying, weren't we, just before we started recording, I feel like you're a mate, a friend, even though I have only met you now for an hour, but we got to be friendly during the lockdown. I came on your podcast.
I dropped something in your coffee just to say.
Yeah. I'm feeling a bit woozy. So it's really great to be here.
Yeah, and it's funny, that thing you said, I said this, and I'll share this with our audience as well, the bond you make through the show is just incredible. I find it so incredible, and it's lovely, and it just actually reinforces this concept I think about life, that this whole concept of spaceship Earth. I don't know if you've heard about this, but no. The concept is essentially that we're all swirling through the universe on this spaceship Earth, and it's got limited resources, and there's no passengers, there's only crew. So we're all there to actually help each other in some way. And it's a great mental model that I have that's very useful and so useful for your book, The Human Edge, as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good to be on the deck with you. I think one of the reasons I connected to you, Aidan, is that you are a genuinely curious person. I don't mean in a weird way, like curious. I mean, you are genuine. You were so curious about the book, and I know you read all the books of the people who come on the show every week. And but that must give you an amazing perspective. So
it's amazing. And, one of the things you talk about in the book is the 4 C's. We're going to get into that. But the other thing that I find it incredible. So we'll talk about the 4 C's in a second, but also the E that we talked about.
Yeah.
It's empathy. And empathy is so important for this world we're going through. And I like that aspect of empathy from Spaceship Earth as well. The whole aspect of, I can't be judgmental of this other person, or I can't cast assumptions because I actually have no idea what's going on inside their world, because we're all subject to these biases that make us human.
Yeah. And I think, obviously in the book I write about the human capabilities that we need as people and as leaders. And that I was writing that before all this crazy COVID stuff happened. But I don't write a lot about empathy in the book, but to me, it's one of those human capabilities that's accelerated through this weird period, because one, we've seen our own mortality. I've lost people, older members of my family. We've seen that life can be a bit absurd and strange and cruel. And also, they're just, obviously we'll talk a little bit about organizational leadership today, because that's, where we both spend a lot of our time. I think because we're in a remote world now, and I think, I'm afraid to say Zoom calls aren't going anywhere. We're going to have a hybrid world. And also we've got this interesting diversity and inclusion agenda that's also been accelerated, as well as technology. I think that idea of walking in somebody else's emotional shoes, that ability to do that's become more important for people in organizations.
It sure is. And we'll talk about that, because you talk about that in your work and your workshops as well about, and we're going to talk about this today. It's not just about the 4 C's. It's about actually implementing them in the organizations as well, because that's the hard bit. Talking about them is the easy bit. So maybe we'll, how about this? So I shared with you beforehand, there's an apocalyptic vision put out there on the internet, and it was with Elon Musk in one of his many interviews. Yeah. And what I'll do is I'm going to share a little excerpt of that, and then we'll dissect it. The first one is where he talks here on this little clip about the idea that AI is an existential threat.
In the past, it has been bad, but not something which represented a fundamental risk to the existence of civilization. AI is a fundamental risk to the existence of human civilization, in a way that car accidents, airplane crashes, faulty drugs, or bad food were not. They were not. They were harmful to a set of individuals within society, of course, but they were not harmful to society as a whole. AI is a fundamental existential risk for human civilization.
Elon Musk. What do you make of that?
Well, what can we say? It's classic Elon Musk, isn't it? He gives this big apocalyptic vision of AI, which is not new to anyone. Let's face it, when anyone's been talking about AI for the last 10 years, the sort of lurid headlines have been about the Terminator, the whole Skynet thing. But then his argument then goes into electric vehicles and autonomous driving in the next 10 years, 20 years, which I agree with, but one doesn't equal the other. That's where I take issue with Elon there.
Yeah, and it's why I wore my pin here. The pins I wear for the show. So this one is Robert Patrick in Terminator 2, where he gets shot in the eye and he comes back into his form again. So that's why I wore that. I was like going, the human edge, where can I go with this? I was like, I don't have any pins of humans. I'll use this one. Thank God I can use it eventually.
It works with Elon's argument. I mean, what do you think of what he said?
I think, because actually what I'll do is I'll play his next clip, because I think it ties in nicely to this clip, which is where he talks about regulation. So roll it there and we'll dissect it in a second.
AI is a rare case where I think we need to be proactive in regulation instead of reactive. Because I think by the time we are reactive in AI regulation, it's too late. And normally the way regulations are set up is that a whole bunch of bad things happen, there's a public outcry, and then after many years, a regulatory agency is set up to regulate that industry. And there's a bunch of opposition from companies who don't like being told what to do by regulators. Anyway, it takes forever. There's a role for regulators. That's very important. And I'm against overregulation for sure. But man, I think we better get on that with AI.
In that clip, he talks about regulation, and that's where I think it's important, because it's not that I don't have faith in governments, but the people who know most about this aren't working for the governments. They're working for the companies who are competing with each other to try and get to the top with AI because of it's such a competitive advantage. That's the problem for me, is that we don't have these people working in governments foreseeing that the problems that are inevitably going to happen. So that's where I feel we're at a weakness.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I'm not an engineer or a roboticist.
Well, I am, Greg.
Are you?
Yeah.
That was, you were keeping
it's a
that
hobby
pretty
of mine.
secret. But I am someone who studied AI in terms of how it impacts the human being and the leader. And so my take on it is Elon Musk's vision in the first instance of the apocalypse, of the singularity, when AI is so powerful, all pervasive on all these servers across Silicon Valley, and suddenly gets consciousness and decides it's more important than we are. Well, I think that's a very long time away. I think they actually asked all the AI experts, I seem to remember from my book, which I wrote a long time ago, and it was something like 50 years away. So that may happen. I'm not sure about that. But sort of stepping back, I do agree there should be regulation, because one of the reasons there's a lot of excitement about AI is because it's a technology with enormous power. And whenever you've got anything with enormous power, it's got enormous capabilities for good, and also it's pretty scary. So we definitely need regulation. But stepping back from that in terms of how it affects us as human beings, this is my take on it, that yes, in the next 5 to 10 years, if you can replicate all the keystrokes and processes in any job, it will be fully automated by AI. I mean, for the first time in history, machines are coming for white-collar jobs. They've obviously long taken human labor out of the process. If you go back to the first industrial revolution, it was steam power that took arms and legs, and now parts of our brain are being sliced away by machines. And so if you are in those jobs, such as being a long haul lorry driver or a taxi driver or an assistant, an executive assistant, you should probably watch out. But the reality is, for the rest of us in more complex jobs, actually, it'll be small parts of our jobs, the repetitious parts of our jobs, that will be cheese sliced away. And that leaves a space for us as human beings to actually excel. What I really love about this debate is it was put very nicely by a roboticist called Hans Moravec. And I don't know if you've heard of him, Aidan. He talks about, if you think about human skills as a geography with the mountain peaks and then the valleys have been filling up with AI water for years. You know, it took calculation, it took playing chess. And the reality is, those things, anyone who can do that to a high level, Garry Kasparov, or those black women who actually wrote the calculations that sent men to the moon in 1960, we should hold those human beings in awe. But the reality is that's very easy for a machine. And we should be heading to the mountaintops for the things that's very difficult for machines. Whatever Elon says, it's difficult for a machine to just go and pick your lunch from a breakfast counter, return to the table, read the expression of someone opposite you, try and empathize with them, have passion about your work, have a sense of humor, collate ideas across boundaries and connect the dots. Those are the things that we are brilliant at, and we have got a huge advantage.
I wrote recently about this idea that we have at home an iRobot, you know, the Roomba vacuum cleaner. And I remember when it came out, because one of my jobs on a Saturday was to vacuum the house. And when it first came out, it was great, but I was like kind of going, it's a bit of animosity towards it. I was like kind of going, I still do a better job than this damn Roomba, right? But what I thought was really interesting was, if you put something in a Roomba's way, it has to remap the territory, right? And I use that as a mental model to go, well, actually, in an age of AI, we have to remap the mental map, the mental territory. And I thought that was a nice way to think about your book, because it's a way we need to remap the mental model for a new age where jobs are getting cheese sliced away, where we need to lean into what makes us more human. Because really, and the term computers actually, as you know, refer to people before, who were number crunchers, essentially. Right. So we need to be less computer-like and more human-like, which is where nice segue for the 4 C's comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't fight a battle you're going to lose. Differentiate with the skills that, you know, I gave, the reason I'm over here, and this reason Aidan doesn't have to pay for my flight, is I was giving a keynote yesterday and talking about empathy.
That's Christmas presents for the kids.
I was talking about leadership capabilities of curiosity and creativity and empathy. And if I tried that 20 years ago at a leadership conference, I'd have been run out of town. But the reality is, all the statistics show that's what's been valued by organizations. That's what's been valued by CEOs. The territory has indeed been remapped. I love that. That's great.
And that's difficult, because one of the things I thought we'd do, because if you haven't heard, Greg and I did an episode probably about a year ago now, Greg, and it was remote, it was on Zoom. And in there we talk deeply about the book. And I wanted to build on that, because these 4 C's are extremely important for all of us in this age of change, this new industrial revolution, if you want to call that, or technological or mental revolution. But I wanted to talk about each of those individually. So how about this way we go systematically, take the C and then go, well, how do I actually bring that into my organization? And then, as you do in the book, you give loads of little tips and tricks and exercises that we can each of us do. We can take one exercise that we can do in an organization to build that muscle.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm now worrying, because computers also have excellent memories. And even when you know this, Aidan, even when you've written your own book, you're thinking, can I remember all that stuff?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show on the screen here as well, to help our audience as well, the 4 C's. So they are consciousness, creativity, collaboration, and curiosity. So I'll finish with curiosity, because that for me, as you said, drives me for the show all the time. So consciousness is number 1.
Yeah. Okay. So for obviously, when you're writing a book, you try and match 4 C's. And under each of those C's in the book, there are two what I call dance steps. And the reason I call them dance steps is like if you learn a dance, you can then learn one dance step, you can put it in any order with other dance steps and make it your own. So
you haven't seen me dance, man.
I haven't seen it. I'm looking forward to that.
The Roomba is better.
That'd be pretty awesome. So the dance steps that sit under consciousness are focus, the ability to find time and space, ironically, in a digitally distracted world where we're being digitally distracted every day by AI-enabled social media, amongst other things, which is slightly strange, isn't it? That you have to differentiate from machines, you occasionally need to disconnect from them. And the other one, which I talk a lot about, not surprisingly with leaders and teams, is the idea of purpose, our why. Rather than not what we do, not how we do it, but why we do it, because that's a very human idea. If you think about computers, they don't really think about why they do what they do. It's important to us and very powerful. Before I talk about exactly how you do it, it's important to realize what it does to you. If you have a clear why of why you work, for example, we've long known it's been hugely psychologically motivating. And, we all know that the top sports people, the top business people, the top entrepreneurs understand the why. But we now know it's kind of deep in our human brain. It's in your brain, there's a thing called the seeking system, that when you understand your why, it emits a neurotransmitter called dopamine that is the one that gets you going. It gets you up in the morning. So to be able to turn that on, you can become your own drug dealer. And unlike most drug dealers, you're encouraging yourself to get off the settee rather than lie there. So that's everything for teams and leaders. That motivation to have the courage, to have the idea that you've got to step forward. So there's lots of different ways to get that into your life. I think firstly, it's an inside out trait. I think if you're talking about a why purpose to other people, it's a good idea to have a think about your own. So literally, I'd advise anyone listening to spend 10 minutes and try and approach that question.
It's difficult for people. We spoke beforehand. We had a coffee, with a lovely coffee across the road beforehand. And one of the things we're talking about was the other things we do, exec coaching being one of those things. But one of the things I find so interesting is I had a guy on the show before, a guy called Manfred Ketz de Vries. Brilliant name. He is one of the leading leaders in the world on executive coaching, coaches CEO. One of his books called The CEO Whisperer. But when I was talking to him, I was saying that one of the things I find most difficulty with my coachees is they just want a to-do list. So they want to tell me what to do. And I'm going, well, before you even write your to-do list, you have to have a to-be list. What do you want to be? What's your vision of yourself? What's your why? What's your purpose? Because that dictates your to-do list.
Yeah. And it's beautifully put. And that's so true. And to think about it in terms of coaching someone, obviously we're all trying to coach ourselves on an amateur basis all the time. And the tendency to go to the list of actions and not understand the bigger picture of how, a why is not only motivational, it's been called a North Star. It's what you follow. My friend Brian Bacon at Oxford Leadership calls it the kebab stick. The kebab stick goes through all the bits of your life and tries to pull it together. So trying to get that first. And then, so I think the question we're getting at here is how do you get it into a team, right? So I think one thing I talk to leaders about is telling stories that really bring the emotional part of it, because it's an emotional concept. It's rational, but it's also emotional about why I do what I do. So my why, and I never come out with it the same way, but it's really, I know I'm in purpose mode when I'm helping other people to learn and to grow. That is what really turns me on. So if you've got a company that's producing a product and has a strategy, telling stories about what that does is proven actually to really bring out that sense of connection. And I'll tell you a story. I was working with a senior executive for an automotive company that made the safety products in the company. And I asked them this question: how do you get the why out to your team. So he said, every year we have a mangled car and we put it in the atrium of our large factory, and the 1,000 or so workers gather round. And next to the car are some people. And last year it was a family, a husband and wife and 2 small children. And we simply tell the story of why that family is there. And they are only there because of the safety features manufactured in that plant. Now, just telling that story, I'm not even involved, and I can feel that what left I've got of the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. That is purpose. And that is leadership with purpose, connecting people to the ripples of how you're affecting other human beings.
So I love that, by the way. That's just a wonderful way of doing it. But even that, the storytelling evokes imagery, and we're visual animals. Like, I mean, I find that fascinating that, yes, many of our audience will be listening on audio only, but we are storytelling animals. We're visual creatures. Back 200,000 years ago, when we were on the great savannas, we navigated the world by vision, while all other animals navigated by sense of smell, so their pheromones. And we forget that. And that visual is created through storytelling, no matter what the medium is. And it's just so powerful. And even that story, it does really evoke so many emotions. Moving on then, because this is tightly connected to the next one. And I'm skipping curiosity, which comes next in the book. But I wanted to go to creativity.
Yeah.
Because in so many organizations, there's this huge desire for creativity. There's an espoused, we're a creative organization, we're an innovative organization. It's written on the walls, it's written in mission statements. But then when creative people join those companies, they quickly get ostracized or ejected or jettisoned from the ship of the organization. And that's a huge problem, because leaderships want it, but they don't know how to welcome it or create the environment for it.
Yeah, that's so true. And as you know, the Human Edge is like this manual for everybody. I actually deliberately wrote it not as a leadership book, although in my work I use it as a leadership framework. My first book, The Spark, was how to lead and manage for creativity. And to cut the story short about what that book's about, it really is about your job as a leader, where creativity is concerned, is about crafting the environment, because that is everything about whether people will bring this innate thing that we have. We're all creative to a different sense, but we've all got creativity within us, the ability to join the dots, come up with something new. It's a human attribute, but it's very, very inhibited by environments that have any fear in it. Fear kills creativity, stone dead. But also you need to provide a resource of time for people to think, to work together, to collaborate, to use their collective intelligence. We'll get to curiosity in a minute, but to be curious, to learn, to gather the cognitive fuel. So one of the things that started me on this whole journey about 15 years ago was the knowledge. There's an American academic called Teresa Amabile, who was kind of doyen of the creativity world. And she did a very big study of most organizations, and came up with a really rather depressing conclusion that creativity is killed more often than encouraged in organizations, and it's mostly accidental. So there's a balance. I used to call it the yin and yang of creative leadership between these things. Of course, we all have to deliver and execute, which means just getting things done. That's business, right? And the reason creativity sits rather uncomfortably in business is it's on a balance. You have to occasionally, as a leader, switch focus and say to your team, right now we're opening up this space. We're going to take time. We're not going to be right. We're going to experiment. Mm-hmm. And it's the leader's job, and it's probably more sophisticated than any leader's job in industrial history, to do that, to go between execution and creativity and hold that tension.
That tension is the hallmark of innovation, really, isn't it? It's the tension between leadership and management, between explore and exploit is just other language for that Alex Osterwalder, for example, uses. That's magnificent, just again to evoke those visions in everybody's mind. So that's kind of, but what's the how of that then? So Amy Edmondson was on the show before talking about her wonderful findings on psychological safety. And one of the ways I kind of processed that was that there's a great I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Chich Nan Han or something like that. He's a Buddhist monk and he's all these wonderful books. But he said, when lettuce doesn't grow, the farmer doesn't turn to lettuce and go, grow, goddammit, lettuce. It's like, it doesn't blame the lettuce. What you do is you actually look at the environment, and the same idea about the leader of an organization being the cultivator of the soil to create the right environment in order for the crops to grow, to pick weeds if they need to be picked, to add nutrients if they need to be done, to till the soil, to water it. That becomes so important. But how? So the shift from that tension of the way things used to be, where I was measured on my results, my technical skills, to creating the environment, is a difficult one, because that needs a different expectation on leaders in organizations. And that for me, I see as a huge problem, because that means the board need to change. And oftentimes the board members are from the way things used to be.
Yeah. And that's, well, take that last point. There's quite a few questions in what you were just saying there, but you know, you and I both work on organizational transformation and leadership. It's so much easier when it's coming from a hierarchical position, because that's the way the organizations run. And so often it's not. The board gets you in and goes, will you deal with those people? We're fine though. It's always a bit like, well, I think you need to rethink that.
Yeah.
But the question, you know, how do you do creativity is obviously kind of a big area. But let's start with Amy Edmondson, because I'm a fan of hers as well. And we're talking about environment. I think one of the key things, we talked about fear, and that's obviously the title of her book. By the way, there were really interesting experiments they did on rats. And they had rats in a cage who were playing. And by the way, rats giggle. Did you know that? They have this high-pitched giggle. It's really cool. And then they put a cat's...
Thankfully, I don't know.
some cat fur in the cage, and the rats just stop playing.
Wow.
And we humans are just the same. As soon as we have a fearful environment, we stop playing. So that's why her book is such... I think that her book and the science that surrounds it on psychological safety, I think, is one of the big pieces of leadership knowledge that anybody should know about. And the first thing you need to know is, what does that mean? What does psychological safety mean? It means that you and I feel safe to take an interpersonal risk, which means if you're my boss, Aidan, I'm free to say, I've got an idea, or I'm not sure we're doing this right, Aidan, or I think we just made a mistake. Can we learn from that? So many organizations don't have that. And that's the first step to having interesting conversations where you can play with ideas and actually clash and disagree agreeably. That is absolutely the leader's job, to craft that environment. So how does the leader do that? I think they need to start embodying a certain amount of humility and vulnerability and an acknowledgement that things don't always work out. They need to give people the time and space to do that. And perhaps one really practical thing that I always say to people is ask more questions, and better and open questions, because it sends a really powerful signal. If the leader is asking the group of people genuinely, by the way, authentic questions that they really are curious about the answers to, because it's sort of saying, one, I can't predict the future. Two, I'm not the smartest person in the room. And three, maybe the answer is out there in this room or the people we know. So just to be clear about what I mean about what's a good question, I mean open questions, not closed questions. So closed questions lead to a yes or no answer. They're sort of what prosecution lawyers use in court. Open questions are like that lead to an open creative conversation, such as, why do we do it this way? How might we try another way? Have you seen what our customers were saying? You know, those kind of questions are so often missing in leadership. And that is a key way, as well as the psychological safety, to start creating that environment where people step in and start using their innate creativity.
And that goes back to measurement of leadership, because many leaders believe they need to be the ones with the answers. And for them to let go of that and go, I don't need to have all the answers, but I need to actually have the people who have the answers, is a big shift for many leaders, because they feel they have to do it. And there's this kind of delegation of that skill, or the need to have all the answers all the time. That's really important. I wanted to share one thing with you. I don't know if you know this. We had Daniel Amen on the show before, brilliant guy on the brain. He's written many books on change your brain, change your life, etc. But he shared a piece about rats and fear, where the question is your fear your fear? So is it actually yours, or did you inherit that fear? So what they did was they took, I think it was rats or mice, and they had them in a cage, and they released the smell of cherry blossom into the cage, and then they gave the rats or the mice a mild shock, electric shock, right? And they had little brain scanners on them. Imagine these little tiny brain scanners. And then, because they have a quick life cycle, they did it with the offspring of that batch, and they just released the smell of cherry blossom in, and the, again, brain scanners, the amygdala, so the fear centers of the mice lit up, right? But then they did it with the grandchildren. Same thing happened. They never had experienced the fear, the reason for the fear, the shock, but the smell had triggered them and primed them for the fear. And I always think about that when it takes a long time to change the culture of an organization because of that, because sometimes the fear lingers, and you can't just get rid of everybody from an organization when you're leading a transformation effort. You need to actually gradually do it and show people that it's a safe environment. And this brings us beautifully to the next one, which is collaboration. This collaborative environment where, yes, I disagree with you, but I'm not, again, fearful of disagreeing with you. And I actually just wrote a blog today about this, that they measured the brains, the fear centers again of the human brain. And they showed when somebody does that and they speak up against the majority consensus, the fear centers light up. So it's not easy for that person. And I want to recognize that to our audience as well. Because many of you listen to the show, that is not easy to be able to speak up, but you need that collaborative environment in order to have more people do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so collaboration, again, is a huge book, and people, have written brilliant books just on one aspect of it. And obviously it's only a quarter of my book. So, terms and conditions apply what I bring to the world of collaboration. But because the book was written with consciousness, we've done it slightly out of order, but that's fine because it starts with consciousness, curiosity, creativity, collaboration. The way I frame collaboration, because this was really aimed at the individual, was if you are purpose-led, you therefore have the courage to step into a different kind of world, to stretch yourself. If you've got the focus, you've time. If you're curious, you gather the cognitive fuel and ask the right questions, which actually gets you to be more creative. So the way I framed collaboration was, well, if you're having ideas, you need fellow human beings to tell you if you're going crazy or not. Because let's face it, even the most talented people, most of their ideas don't work. They're not great. It's only a small portfolio of your ideas that are worth taking forward. So you have to go and experiment in the real world. And what I advise people to do, and the science is supporting this, is to form a wider network of people. Like you and I, got to know each other through this podcast. And it's, we know lots of people, but when we had a coffee before that, when I was listening to you telling me about your business, my brain was pinging. I was getting new, interesting ideas. And that's what we need as human beings. We need a network of fellow collaborators. It will make us far more innovative and creative. And all the science shows people with what they call weak ties in their network, i.e. lots of people outside of that Dunbar's number of 150 people we know really well, they are more innovative because they're just simply getting more information and it's challenging them. But to come back to kind of collective intelligence, that part of it, I think I'll just tell the story of the Brain Trust at Pixar because I think it's a good one. It kind of shows you what it is. And so this is the story of that Ed Catmull, who is the founder of Pixar, which I think is probably one of the most consistently creative and commercially successful organizations around. So I use it a lot as an example. He says those brilliant movies, The Incredibles and Toy Story, when they first muted as an idea, he calls them ugly babies. Which is a horrible phrase because you don't want any baby. You don't want to be let's face it, most
I always have that where somebody kind of goes, "What do you think of my baby?" And I'm like kind of going,
"Yeah, it's pretty ugly, actually."
And I'm terrible at hiding it. I just don't answer.
Let's just pause on that.
I'm going under a tunnel.
Aidan get thinking, God, that's a really ugly baby. But this is kind of ideas. And, because we've all seen the finished products and they're not ugly babies. The Incredibles, I mean, I watched it 10 times because my boys were pretty young at that period, and I thought it was really good. So if you go back, it was an ugly baby when it started. It was misshapen, the characters weren't there. And I think that's really inspiring, because if Ed Catmull and those incredibly talented people at Pixar are having ugly babies, and they're the good ideas, the rest didn't even make it to ugly baby phase, and then they become better. I think that encourages all of us to try and work on ideas and incrementally improve them. But it's the crucible in which they do this that's interesting. They call it the brain trust. And this is something that people can apply to their own life and also to their organization. And they take this idea into the brain trust and out. And the people on the brain trust, I think it's about 15 people or so, they're picked not just because they're like brilliant directors or technically brilliant. They're picked because they're also empathetic. They can also help someone develop without crushing them. Without going saying, that baby is so ugly, you should go and like jump off a cliff. The people leave the room with new ideas, and they have a psychologically safe discussion. And that's how they develop their ideas and come up with these incredible products. They're humble at the start, and they all come together. And I love that. I think that's just a great thing that we can all replicate.
I love that. And one of my, I suppose, heroes in innovation is Buckminster Fuller, and he has a beautiful quote. There's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly, and that's what that says to me, is that somebody may have the most embryonic idea, but you don't know how it's going to play out, and you can't crush it on somebody, not at the early stages. You can, and I think this is why the importance of an MVP, a minimal viable product. Get it out there, see, do people like it? Can I play with it, etc.? I mean, this episode is an MVP in a way. It's, hopefully not an ugly baby. It's definitely a caterpillar, because, again, and this is thanks to Zai, I'm able to actually play with it and go, how can we actually build this and grow it differently? And by the way, to you, the listener as well, please do give us feedback, what you think, how I can improve the show as always, but also how did this episode land for you as well? So give us a shout on the innovationshow.io and the innovationshow.io newsletter.
Don't just say get another guest. That's just rude.
So let's bring it back to curiosity. You mentioned that, it was one of the things that drives you. Certainly, absolutely drive me. I can't, like, when somebody mentions something else in the book, when this is the problem for me, I'll read it and then there'll be a reference to this other book, and I'll go down the rabbit hole, find that book, and then I'll buy that, and I'll just have this network of books as a result. And I'm so grateful for whatever in my life happened to create that curiosity. But it is so important, because I thought about this from several ways. You mentioned Pixar, and associate for me is Steve Jobs. And one of the things he said that is so valuable, like him or love him, is that you have to you have to like the thing you're pursuing in life, because that will help you persevere all the crap you need to. I always think of that image of Shawshank Redemption, all those tunnels of crap that you have to get through in order to get to your vision, because you will inevitably encounter those things. But one of the other things that drives you, so it's like this magnetic force of the vision that you have, and that goes back to the storytelling you talked about at the start, the why, the purpose, the North Star. But then there's the curiosity as well, to actually go and investigate different parts and kind of and ask yourself, back to what you said about the leadership, bringing in positive questioning into an organization becomes so important.
I think, we're seeing it across the board. You and I are lucky enough to see kind of the sort of RFPs that come out of companies now, requesting, leadership support. Curiosity is just in all of them. And for good reason, because it is the prelude to creativity, team and individual creativity. Team and individual creativity is the prelude to innovation. Innovation is the prelude to next year's revenues. So that's the obvious connection. And there's so much to say about curiosity from an individual perspective as well. And if anyone's out there, one of the things that I wrote about curiosity before creativity, we all would like to feel that we can be a bit more creative. But it's a bit like happiness. Don't aim directly at it. Try and go on a circuitous route. And the best place to start, I think, is curiosity. Because if you can get in there, that's when you are learning. new things. And the important thing, I don't know, have you ever noticed this, Aidan? When you buy a new car or get something new, like for example, I just bought a new Labrador. It's my third Labrador in my life.
I saw it on our call, our prep call. Beautiful dog.
And suddenly I'm seeing black Labradors everywhere when I'm walking around. Now, I wasn't before. There's not more black Labradors in the world. Just my reticular activating system in my brain has been turned on. Suddenly there's a whole new part of the world, in this case, black Labradors, that's available to me. That happens to all of us with new shoes and new cars. And so that's because curiosity is on a kind of an inverted U shape. When you don't know anything about a subject, you're not interested in it. You learn a little bit about it and it starts to pull you in because you start to see it everywhere. And all creativity, 99% of creativity is when an idea jumps the fence. So the way that U-shaped curve works is really interesting when it comes to innovation. Did you know why we've got all those crazy fonts? You know, when you go onto a computer, like you've got the huge drop-down list of Calibri and Times New Roman. And that came up from, you mentioned Steve Jobs. That came from Steve Jobs' curiosity, because when he dropped out of college, he went back and sat in the back of a calligraphy course. And which is the art of handwriting. And from then on, he became a bit of a font nerd for the rest of his life. He just likes fonts. So when the Mac came around, he wanted the word processor on the Mac to have all the best fonts. So that's calligraphy.
Sorry, but I'm just thinking speed dating. And it's like going, so hi, I'm Steve.
Yeah.
What do you like to do, Steve? I love fonts. And
Next.
Sorry, the James Bond thing where you drop into the sharks.
But you might find the right woman who's like, oh my God, I've been waiting for that all my life, Steve.
The music starts
What do you like best, Ariel? Okay, so
sorry.
So no, I just think that's really cool because it's just a very small innovation, but it's the reason why we've got that in the world. I'm not sure how massively useful that is, but it's an example of curiosity that roamed widely and allowed calligraphy to jump the fence into computing. And that's, what if we want new things in our life, that's what we need to do.
So that brings us now to empathy. And I was telling about Elliot Aronson. Like, I'm an Elliot Aronson fanboy now. 19-year-old man, had him on the show last week. Just his writing is so beautiful. But he talked at the end of the show about this invention he had called the jigsaw school. So he brought in the idea of the jigsaw school, and it brings so many of the elements you talked about today together. The idea was that if you think about a classroom in the period of time that he brought in this very segregated America, the Brown versus the Board of Education passing had just happened, so blacks were able to mix with whites in schools again, but there was fist fights in the classrooms in Texas, for example. Very segregated society. So he's like, we have to do something. So he took it upon himself, him and his research team. And they brought in this idea where there was teams of 5 within a classroom, because what he saw was everybody competed. So this idea where the teacher asks a question and you and I both know the answer. It's like, oh, and you're holding the hand up, right? So instead of that competition, what the teacher would do was assign us a certain part of the jigsaw to work on. And then we worked as a team, as a collaborative team. And then for me to get 100%, I needed everybody else on my team to perform well. So instead of actually becoming competitive, it became collaborative. And if Greg was struggling on his piece, I would help him instead of compete with him. And what it did was it drew out the humanity, the spaceship Earth of everybody, the whole idea that we're all in this together. But then on top of that, the knock-on effect was that's where it started. And this is so, I think it's so important for the workplace. It started there and then it trickled into life. So out in the playground, these kids started to mix together. They started to collaborate together, and it was just wonderful. We finished that with a really tear-jerking story. So this little kid called Willie Johnson, the teacher decides to bring them to this really poor class from a very underprivileged background, bring them to a museum. And they had looked at a picture of this artist had drawn of him and his mother holding hands. And she goes, why do you think, great question, right? Why do you think the artist drew this picture of him and his mother rather than just keeping the photograph. So class goes quiet. They all consider this. And this kid, Willie Johnson, in the back class, smallest kid in the class, never spoken. He had lost his mother to a drug overdose. He pipes up and he goes, and he points to the hands on the portrait that the artist has drawn, and he says, because he wanted to capture the softness of her hands in that picture. And the whole class just quiet, which, as Elliot said, was a miracle in itself. First time class has ever been quiet.
Wow.
But then the bully of the class, biggest guy in the class, goes over to Willie, and she's gone, oh, what's going to happen here? And he hugs him, and the whole class come together and hug. And it was just, talk about the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
That, for me, was like, that is empathy. And it started with a mechanical thing, changing the environment, changing how people collaborated together, trickles into real life, and all of a sudden you have true empathy.
Yeah. And, I think we talked at the start, didn't we, about why empathy is more important in organizational settings because of hybrid working and because of a generation of people that want to feel like they're understood and they're nurtured. But, if we just finished by thinking more broadly about the era in which we're living in an era of digital tribalism, of political divisions across the world, in the United States, in the UK. And I think the art of empathy, one, it's like curiosity, by the way. It's not a fixed trait. You can develop it further in yourself. And two, it's never been more needed because, the idea of reaching across to other people that disagree with us and trying to understand what they're saying is incredibly needed. I mean, I don't know if I'm a fan of Brené Brown.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about sympathy, saying, oh, you're in trouble. I'm really sorry. Would you like a cup of tea? Empathy is so you say you're down in a hole. Empathy is I literally climb down in the hole and say, I know what it's like to be in a hole. I'm here for you. And compassion is I'm going to do something to move towards you. I'm going to support you. And that's what we need more of in the world. It's never been more important for human beings to come together when AI and machines are contributing to dividing us.
Greg, that is a beautiful way to finish. And the message, it comes full circle. Spaceship Earth, brother. Everybody together. Crew, no passengers. I want to thank our guest today. First in-person guest. Hopefully you like the experiment. It is a caterpillar. Hopefully become a butterfly someday. Never quite get there. But he is author of The Human Edge, How Curiosity and Creativity Are Your Superpowers in the Digital Economy. He is Greg Orme. Thank you for joining us.
It's been an absolute brilliant honor to be here. Thanks, Aidan.
Thanks so much. And as always, thanks to our partner, Zai. Zai is a global financial services company supporting innovation in all its forms, including this show. Thanks to them. By supporting them, you're supporting us. Go to hellozai.com to find out more.